You're listening to the Get Meal Prep Show, a podcast about meal planning strategies that help you positively nourish your body, learn about nutrition, and most importantly, get dinner on the table. You know that this is a podcast for you if you've ever thought, oh no, it's 3 o'clock and I have no idea what's for dinner. We dive deep into meal planning methods and meal planning strategies that help you prepare healthy home-cooked meals that doesn't leave you feeling like you're tied down to the kitchen. I'm your host, Susan Watson, registered dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, and meal planning strategist for the online course Get Meal Prepped, which can be found at www.nutritionacademy.co. My team at A Nutrition Academy and my counseling practice, A Little Nutrition, has formed the Get Meal Prep method that helps people improve their eating habits by cooking whole foods and not relying all the time on convenience food products. Aside from our online course, you can work with us via our one-on-one coaching services. You can find the links to our packages in the show notes below this recording. We're so happy to have you here today and share this episode with you. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the Get Meal Prep Show on iTunes and leave a rating and review. It might not seem important, but your review can make a big impact and help us continue to deliver amazing content and keep bringing you the best meal planning strategies so that you can be the healthiest you ever. It's super easy to leave a review. You can leave a review from your podcast app. Simply search the Get Meal Prep Show, click reviews, and then write a review. We would love to hear from you. Now let's dive into today's episode. Hi everybody, and welcome back to the Get Meal Prep Show. Today I have Madeline Moore share with me, and we are recording from our Lakewood office in Winnipeg, which is actually inside of a Walmart. So we didn't really recognize that there's sometimes going to be some PA sounds, or I don't know, like it's a little bit louder than we hope. So we hope that the recording is okay, and gently forgive us for any sort of background noise that you might hear today. So thanks, Madeline, for coming in today. It's great to connect with you, and looks like we're going to be talking about how to manage meal planning for families that have a variety of food preferences. And I hear this all the time, where I've got one family member who, really wants to do meal planning, but finds that everybody else in the house has different tastes and different preferences, which then becomes a barrier to meal planning. So, Madeline, let's talk a little bit about that today and your experience.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that we are actually talking about this particular topic, because I find that, you probably see it all the time too, right? We get so many clients where it is a concern, where they're not sure exactly what to shop for or what to plan, and they kind of feel like they get stuck in a food rut too. So I do have like 3 tips that I think we can have a conversation about, and just to dive into it, I think the first one is really positive communication.
Mm-hmm.
So actually having a conversation with members of your family about, what meals and foods you actually enjoy, even reasons why you like or dislike a food, or why you want to start incorporating certain foods into your diet as well. Because I find that's quite powerful when you actually put a reason to exactly why you like a food or not, and then it just forms a bit more understanding.
Like taste or texture, or like, I don't really like curry foods, and recognize that it's taste versus, say, color.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I'm sure, like, you see it all the time too, in this positive communication. Like, what do you find that you talk about in session with clients?
Well, I think the key is, again, having that understanding with your family's taste preferences. And often I hear parents complaining about their kids, or concerned about their kids is maybe a better word, and stating that they're picky eaters, and that makes it really difficult. And I really like to change the dialogue around the word picky and try to say maybe selective, and then try to get to the root of why the child or the family member is selective on that taste preference. And I think we all have the right to, like certain foods and not like certain foods. But if we can get to the root as to why they don't like these taste preferences, then we can help with the planning, and maybe omit certain ingredients in the meal planning process. But one of the best tips I like to do is, and I talk about this in the Get Meal Prepped course,
And that is to have a master meal list that's broken down into family specific preferences. So, one style of meal planning, master meal list, is you break your master meal list down into breakfast, lunch, and supper. But with families, I like to recommend breaking it down into mom's favorites, dad's favorites, brother and sister's favorites. And then that way, when it comes to meal planning, you pull out your calendar and you get brother to pick one meal for that week that, is his favorite. With the understanding that sister gets to pick maybe on Thursday night, and that, mom and dad might have a favorite throughout the week too. And that the idea is that everybody, has a chance to have their favorite meal sometime throughout the week, and that it's okay if, on Monday you're not having your favorite because you recognize and support that it's mom's night to have her favorite. So that's one way of kind of keeping that communication positive, and also keeping involvement with the family members around meals and meal preferences. And a lot of the times, there's a favorite meal that everybody likes, and then you can, put that meal in the schedule somewhere and have more of a positive dinner time around that meal.
Yeah, and that just makes me think too about, I always have this discussion with Brian, my partner, about really the foods I really enjoy, mm-hmm. and that, okay, well, this is the day where I'm going to have this as a side dish, but we're still going to have, this protein or whatever extra food on the side that he still enjoys. Mm-hmm. And, just having that communication, I think, goes a long way, and that you can be more positive about it too. So I think that's actually a good segue to the second point here, or a strategy is or mindset is actually being assertive and not passive. Mm-hmm. So I find a lot with individuals, in a family, that if you're the person who does the majority of the meal planning, mm-hmm. you get kind of stuck in the rut of being, so-and-so likes this food or just these meals, and you get kind of stuck in this repeating factor where you almost kind of resent the fact that you're only planning meals that they enjoy and mm-hmm. ones that you don't mm-hmm. necessarily, or you find you're kind of bored about. Mm-hmm.
No, I know what you mean with that. And I had one experience with a client where her taste preferences and what she wanted was maybe a little bit more carb, a lot more vegetables, but she had really active kids in different sports, and they needed more high energy density type foods. But she was doing all the meal planning and got kind of in a bit of a rut with always making the same types of meals that she really didn't like, but didn't also want to be cooking 2 or 3 different meals. And but was just feeling kind of like, oh, I have to always cater to my kids' needs. And I basically encouraged her to think about using cooked components to base those meals, which we have a section in the course on as well, where you're cooking up one ingredient, say like chicken, and then prepping it up in 2 different ways. So you might, like a mom, might want to have it on salad and have some veggies with some quinoa, and kids might want to have it in a casserole or, something that is able to prep up a little bit faster. So that's one thing. And I also find that, so with kind of being maybe assertive, is that we have to recognize that we all have our own taste preferences, and just because we're the cook or the person doing the meal planning, it doesn't mean that we're catering solely to everybody's needs and that our needs get to be put on the back burner. So one of the areas where I feel like I've made adjustments to make sure that I'm not being passive and just always catering to my husband's needs is, so he really does not like any sort of plant-based proteins. So lentils, chickpeas, you name it, really doesn't like curries or any sort of Indian spice, which I absolutely love. So what I do is I will, instead of never having those dishes or only ordering them at a restaurant, I will make them for lunch. I'll cook them up on a Sunday and have my lentil curry for lunch. And that way then, I'm meeting him middle way by having his favorites at supper time. So, and then he just packs the leftovers from supper for his lunch. So that way we're kind of having our favorites and still enjoying it, and I'm not feeling like I'm getting stuck in a rut with not having some of the foods that I really like.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, just you saying that, I feel like we're just on the same page of, like, that's exactly what I have to do.
Yeah.
Because, like, especially with plant-based proteins, like, I think my partner's getting, you know, a little bit more into it. Like, he's open to trying new foods, but at the same time, like, beans are a big example of, like, a big pass. And we've had that discussion of, like, he doesn't like the texture. That's okay. I'll just pack him for lunch, or, like, have a meal when maybe he's away for the evening, or that sort of thing. But still, you know, being assertive in that you still deserve to have the foods that you enjoy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess we've kind of, leading up to this point, and really when we think about what we talk about on this podcast too, is that really the last tip I have here is to take out your calendar and plan meals.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really to save yourself from, you know, being a shorter cook, because when you actually take the time to assess, okay, this is the problem, or okay, I really want to have these meals I enjoy, but where do they fit in? You know, how can I perhaps prepare some of those cook components like you mentioned, and you know, it just goes a longer way.
Well, with like taking a look at the title of this podcast, How to Manage Meal Planning for Families with a Variety of Food Preferences, if you don't have that calendar and plan out your meals, you definitely could set yourself up to being a short order cook. So I'll give an example of myself. Some weeks I'm on the ball and I've got the whole week planned out, and those are usually like my fright weeks where I've got a lot on the go. Maybe I'm working every night and I just want to make sure that everything is going to go smoothly, and it usually does. It's the weeks that I'm not as busy that I might be a little bit more laid back and be like, oh, I'll just kind of cook as I go. And unfortunately, what happens then with not having a plan, my kids will come home and they'll say, what's for supper? And I'll be like, what do you guys feel like? And then I've got one wanting one thing, one wants the other, and I've kind of given them the opportunity to complain and put in their orders, and it is really last minute. Whereas if I've had a plan and I just tell them what we're having, it's like, okay, Mom, and, you know, they're on their way to doing whatever they do. So it really does have some benefit having a plan put in place, and I also find that it really... it gives you those options to incorporate the foods that you like, as well as also incorporate the foods that the family members really like, because you've planned it out, and you can look back at it and say, like, look, Johnny, and look, Jill, just name some kids, I don't know, and just be like, you know, you're complaining today, but you had your favorites on Tuesday, and Jill, you had yours on Wednesday, so mom gets what she wants on Thursdays, and you can just kind of, you have some sort of record, too, of what was taken care of, and for nutrition wise, you can look back at it too and say, like, oh, you know, we haven't had a vegetarian meal in 2 weeks, maybe it's time to have a meatless Monday, and it helps to make sure that you're able to plan that out with a little bit more structure.
Yeah, and it's also helpful that, like, just when you were saying that, I was thinking of, like, when you have it even written down, or you can look back at your calendar, if you're kind of having a week where it's really busy and you're just kind of flustered with like deciding what to make, at least you have that as a reference for, you know, oh right, this was really easy, or just what you were mentioning
this
before.
Week worked really well, let's just repeat it.
Yeah, exactly. Or like using the master meal, as like you mentioned earlier too. So yeah, I think, you know, it all comes back to the meal planning, but also what we talked about here with communication and you know, being assertive, I think is real important too. And yeah, I hope everyone finds this helpful, and I appreciate that I'm on here to talk about it too. So
yeah, I think the last thing that I'll just kind of reiterate when it comes to managing meal planning for families is that there really is no one way to meal plan. And in our course, Get Meal Prepped, we do talk about the different styles of meal planners. And I've got some feedback from other clients who've gone through the course and said it was really beneficial because they thought, oh, you know, I have to spend 8 hours in the kitchen and, you know, plan, you know, everything out for the whole week. And, well, what happens if something comes up? And there's lots of different strategies for managing the different styles of meal planning throughout the week, and even your own way to, I guess, manage your own preferences for meal planning. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be 100%, and even if you're just planning out half your week, it's going to save you a heck load of time and money by putting together that plan. So I think that's it for today, but thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. See you later, Madeline.
See you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Get Meal Prep Show. If you have any questions about today's episode, or you would like to email us, you can at info@nutritionacademy.co. We'd love to hear from you, and if you have any suggestions or different topics for the show, we'd be happy to hear from you. You can also find me on Instagram at @alittlenutrition, and I have lots of meal planning photos and tips on my stories, so I'd love to connect with you there as well. Again, that's @littlenutrition is my handle. Anyways, until next episode, see you then. Bye.